For more than 400 years, the Roman Empire ruled not just with armies, but with something far more powerful: trust. A Roman coin was accepted across 3 continents, from the misty markets of Britannia to the sun-bleached ports of Alexandria. It did not need translation. It did not need explanation. Its value was understood. This documentary is the story of how that trust was built and how, slowly and almost invisibly, Rome destroyed it. Not in a single moment, not through one mistake, but through a decision repeated again and again and again. Long before Rome became an empire, it was a republic struggling to survive. Early Roman money was crude but honest. Bronze bars called as rude. They were not stamped with faces or slogans. They were measured by weight. Value was physical. You could feel it in your hand. This system was inconvenient but trustworthy, and trust mattered more than convenience. Around 211 BCE, during the Second Punic War, Rome introduced a revolutionary coin, the denarius. It was silver, nearly pure, carefully weighed. 1 denarius equaled a day's wage for a laborer. For the first time, Rome had a standardized currency powerful enough to unite an economy. This coin did something extraordinary. It turned conquest into commerce. With a trusted currency, Rome expanded rapidly. Taxes were predictable. Trade was efficient. Soldiers were loyal. The denarius became the backbone of Roman power. Merchants trusted it. Soldiers demanded it. Provincial governors relied on it. For nearly 2 centuries, its silver content barely changed. This stability was rare in ancient history, and it created prosperity.
Stable money allowed Rome to do something no empire had done before: create a continental market. Grain from Egypt fed Italy. Wine from Gaul flowed east. Silver from Spain filled treasuries. Prices remained relatively stable for generations. Families saved money knowing it would still be valuable years later. This was Rome at its economic peak.
But empire is expensive. As borders expanded, so did obligations. Rome now had permanent armies, long defensive frontiers, roads, forts, and cities, bureaucracies, and pensions. The army alone consumed enormous resources, and unlike earlier conquests, new territories were no longer rich enough to pay for expansion. Rome had reached its natural limits. The expenses remained, the easy income disappeared.
To cover costs, Rome raised taxes, but heavy taxation bred resistance. Revolts broke out, tax evasion increased, economic strain spread. The treasury felt the pressure, and that pressure landed on the emperor's desk.
In 64 CE, Emperor Nero made a decision that seemed insignificant. He reduced the silver content of the denarius slightly. The coin still looked the same, still functioned the same, but it contained less silver. This allowed Rome to mint more coins from the same amount of metal. It was quiet, almost invisible, but it crossed a line.
Rome had discovered something powerful. It could spend money it did not have. No vote, no announcement, just a slightly lighter coin. This was not fraud in appearance. It was fraud in substance, and it worked. People did not immediately lose faith. Why would they? The empire was strong. The army was victorious. Life went on. Trust does not vanish overnight. It erodes slowly, and Rome would rely on that delay.
After Nero, future emperors faced the same pressures, and they remembered the solution. When money was tight, reduce the silver. Each emperor debased just a little more. No one wanted to be the first to stop, because stopping meant admitting weakness.
By the end of the 1st century CE, Rome was no longer an expanding republic, it was a permanent empire. And permanent empires require permanent armies. Rome stationed legions along the Rhine, the Danube, the eastern frontier, North Africa, Britain. More than 300,000 soldiers stood under arms. Each soldier required regular pay, equipment, food, and retirement rewards. The Roman state existed above all else to pay its army. In early Rome, soldiers were farmers who returned home after war. But by the imperial period, soldiering became a career. A soldier served for 20 to 25 years. At the end, he expected a cash bonus or land. This promise bound soldiers to the emperor, but it also locked the emperor into massive financial obligations. Fail to pay the army, and you lose the throne. Rome had no peaceful system of succession. Emperors were not elected, they were proclaimed by soldiers. This created a deadly incentive. Any general could become emperor if he paid more. Coins became weapons. Money bought loyalty faster than ideology. After Nero, silver content declined steadily. Under emperors like Vespasian, Domitian, Trajan, the denarius was still mostly silver, but less than before. Each reduction solved a short-term problem. Each created a long-term one. Rome was trading future stability for present survival.
The 2nd century CE is often called Rome's Golden Age. Peace, prosperity, strong rulers. But beneath the surface, the currency was weakening. Silver content fell from near pure to around 75–80%. People did not panic because life still worked. This is how monetary collapse always begins, quietly.
Earlier empires funded themselves through conquest. Rome once did the same, but by the mid-2nd century, borders stabilized, rich lands were already taken. New wars were defensive, not profitable. There was no flood of new silver. Expenses stayed high. Income stagnated. The gap widened. Even Rome's philosopher-emperor faced reality. Marcus Aurelius ruled during plagues, border wars, economic stress. To pay the army, he sold palace treasures. He melted statues. He debased coins further, not because he wanted to, because he had to.
After Marcus Aurelius, Rome entered instability. Commodus ruled not by wisdom but fear. The army demanded higher pay, the treasury strained, silver content fell again, trust weakened further. This was no longer adjustment, it was dependence.
By the late 2nd century, civil wars erupted. Each claimant to power minted coins, promised bonuses, paid soldiers immediately. Silver purity dropped sharply. Quantity mattered more than quality. Coins became political propaganda.
Emperor Septimius Severus gave one instruction to his sons: keep the soldiers happy, ignore everyone else. He increased army pay dramatically. He funded it by debasing silver. This decision reshaped Rome. From this point on, the army dominated politics. The economy existed to serve it. Civil society weakened.
By the early 3rd century, the denarius contained barely 50 to 60% silver. Prices began rising noticeably. People noticed coins felt lighter. Merchants adjusted prices. Savings lost value. Rome was experiencing inflation without understanding it.
In 215 CE, Emperor Caracalla introduced the Antoninius. It was labeled as 2 denarii. It was worth far less. It contained only slightly more silver than 1 denarius. This was deception made official. Inflation surged.
Older, purer coins disappeared. People hoarded them. New coins flooded markets. Merchants charged more. Trust collapsed further. Rome entered a monetary death spiral. As coins lost value, barter increased. Taxes became harder to collect. Trade slowed. Money stopped being money. It became metal tokens with no meaning.
By 235 CE, Rome entered the crisis of the 3rd century. In 50 years, over 20 emperors, endless civil wars, economic breakdown. Each crisis meant more debasement. Each debasement made the next crisis worse.
Rome had no inflation statistics, but evidence remains. Price edicts, wage records, hordes of old coins. Prices exploded, confidence vanished, debasement had become Rome's addiction. Each dose weaker, each crisis stronger. The empire survived, but only on borrowed time. By the mid-3rd century, Rome was no longer a single cohesive state. It was fractured politically, militarily, and economically. The empire faced barbarian invasions, civil wars every few months, famine and plagues, an unpayable army. But the underlying cause, the slow erosion of trust in money, was invisible to many. Silver had lost its meaning. Copper flooded circulation. Antoninian coins contained less than 5% silver in many regions. Merchants refused to accept debased coins. Taxes were nearly impossible to collect. Trade slowed to local levels. Rome's economy was disintegrating silently. When emperors attempted reform, they faced a brutal choice: restore silver content and risk rebellion because the army's pay would drop, continue debasement and risk inflation, civil unrest, and collapse. Neither choice was politically safe. Every temporary solution worsened long-term problems. Debasement had become a political tool and a trap. In 284 CE, Diocletian became emperor. He inherited an empire on the verge of collapse. 20 emperors over 50 years, borders under constant attack, a treasury unable to sustain operations. Diocletian's approach was methodical. He introduced reforms on 3 fronts: political, dividing the empire into east and west with co-emperors; military, strengthening frontiers and reorganizing legions; economic, attempting to restore order to the currency. In 301 CE, Diocletian issued the infamous Edict on Maximum Prices. The edict attempted to fix prices of goods, wages of workers, penalties for violators. It was intended to stop inflation caused by debasement, but the results were catastrophic. Merchants refused to sell at mandated prices. Barter replaced coins in many regions. Hoarding of scarce resources skyrocketed. The edict failed spectacularly because trust cannot be legislated. With currency failing, Rome began a forced economy. Farmers had to deliver crops directly to the army. Artisans were assigned roles and wages fixed by decree. Trades became hereditary. Sons were forced to follow the father's profession. The empire had moved from a market-based economy to a command economy. It was stable in theory. It was lifeless in practice. Money no longer represented value. It represented obligation. Rome's once vast trade networks disintegrated. Egypt no longer shipped surplus grain to Italy. Gaul and Hispania became increasingly self-sufficient. Luxury goods vanished from urban markets. What remained was a fragmented economy, local in scope. Coins circulated less and less. Barter replaced currency in many regions.
The empire was still Rome on paper, but economically it was a shadow. The collapse of trust in money had profound social effects. Farmers became bound to estates, proto-serfs. Artisans lost independence. Soldiers relied on land and privileges rather than pay. Cities shrank, public works decayed, and urban life vanished. Rome had built a civilization around trust and commerce. Debasement destroyed it piece by piece. While modern economists study hyperinflation in Germany or Zimbabwe, Rome experienced the first large-scale, prolonged hyperinflation. Coins changed value daily. Prices multiplied multiple times within months. Old silver coins were hoarded, moved from circulation. People no longer trusted money to store value. Markets operated on confidence, and confidence was gone. The army, once loyal due to regular pay, became a political force. Generals declared themselves emperors to pay soldiers. Civil wars became frequent. Soldiers demanded higher donatives funded by further debasement. Money no longer maintained order, it fueled conflict. Diocletian's solution was administrative. East and West divided. Multiple co-emperors to manage regions. Separate currencies minted in different regions. The intent, control. The reality, fragmentation. Each region struggled with its own supply of coins. Trust in currency fractured regionally. Rome's unity existed in name only. By the early 4th century, silver coins had lost credibility. Constantine introduced the solidus, a high-purity gold coin. Gold was trusted, unlike debased silver, but gold was scarce, mostly used for elites and government, did not reach common citizens. The empire had created a dual economy, gold for state and elite, debased silver or copper for the masses. Trust for ordinary citizens never recovered. The Roman monetary system never stabilized fully again. Cities continued to shrink, trade networks weakened, taxes were paid in goods, not in money. Soldiers became tied to land instead of pay. Rome survived politically, economically it was hollow. The empire would face waves of barbarian invasions and fail, not because of sword alone, but because money no longer worked.
The Roman story teaches a clear lesson. Trust is money. Debasement destroys trust. Civilizations collapse quietly, long before visible conquest. Rome fell, coin by coin. Not with armies alone, not with fire and sword alone, but with economic decay created from within. By the early 4th century, Rome faced an empire divided by war, inflation, and mistrust. Silver coins had lost meaning. Copper coins were worthless. Constantine introduced the solidus, a high-purity gold coin weighing about 4.5 grams. For the first time in centuries, Rome had a reliable currency. But it came with limitations. Solidus was scarce, used primarily for state officials, army elites, and large landowners. Common people continued to use debased silver and barter. The empire's economy was now dual-tiered, gold for the elite, chaos for the masses. This dual system created problems. Elites prospered, common citizens struggled. Markets became local, not imperial. Trade between regions slowed. Money no longer united the empire, it divided it. The empire survived politically, but economically the foundations were fractured. The Western Roman Empire weakened steadily after Constantine. Reasons? Military pressure, Germanic tribes and other invaders threatened borders. Economic collapse, currency debasement and local bartering made it impossible to fund armies. Population decline, plague, famine, and poverty reduced taxable population.
loss of trade. Mediterranean commerce declined as trust in currency vanished. Cities shrank, infrastructure decayed, and the once rich empire became a shadow of itself. History often portrays barbarians as the destroyers of Rome. The truth is subtler. Rome was already hollowed out economically. Armies were underfunded and unmotivated. Cities were weak and poorly defended. Barbarians often inherited a failing system rather than conquering a thriving one. Rome's collapse was internal first, external second. As the Western Roman Empire declined, society transformed. Farmers bound to estates became serfs. Artisans lost independence. Soldiers became settlers, tied to land rather than pay. Trade retreated to local markets. Rome had destroyed more than money. It had destroyed social mobility, independence, and commerce. The Eastern Roman Empire, later called Byzantium, lasted longer, but it too relied on gold and limited trust. Solidus backed the economy. Trade was concentrated and controlled. Silver coins circulated less and less. Even in the East, monetary stability was fragile and elite-focused. Trust remained the key. Rome's story is not just about coins or emperors, it is about trust and stability. Trust in money is fragile. Debasement may solve short-term problems, but creates long-term collapse. Civilizations erode slowly, silently, before visible defeat. Economic decay often precedes military conquest. Rome fell coin by coin, not with sword alone. The Roman experience offers warnings for today. Money is a social contract. Government manipulation of currency without value erodes trust. Inflation undermines markets. Economic mismanagement can destabilize societies quietly. Rome teaches that empire, wealth, and power are temporary if economic foundations are ignored. There was no final day for Rome. No official declaration, no dramatic destruction. Markets stopped functioning, cities shrank, citizens lost faith in currency. Rome did not fall with fire, it fell with coin by coin, promise by promise, trust by trust. History does not repeat, but it rhymes. Empires believe they are immortal. Currencies are trusted forever. Systems appear unbreakable. Rome teaches us nothing lasts without trust. Money is more than coins, it is confidence. Collapse is often quiet, incremental, invisible. The fall of Rome is a story for every age, a reminder that economic decay precedes visible collapse. Rome ruled the known world for centuries. It built roads, aqueducts, cities, and laws. Its coins once symbolized trust, stability, and power. But trust is fragile. Coins can be debased. Promises can be broken. Emperors learned too late that money is not just metal, it is faith, obligation, and society itself. The Roman Empire did not end with swords or invasions. It ended quietly, in the decay of its money, in the erosion of trust, and in the loss of economic freedom. Rome fell coin by coin, and history still whispers its lesson.